Get started again here. We talked about him coming as a virgin, and then we talked about him being in the temple. Now let's think for just a moment about the first recorded, according to Scripture, the first recorded miracle that he did. And that was when he turned water to wine at that wedding. Now, at that wedding, that was terrible to run out of wine. But he did, or they did. And his mother, now I think this is important. I never do get the whole thing of this, but his mother said to him when she found out they didn't have any wine, now remember what we're talking about. He's doing these proofs to prove to me and you who he was. And his mother said, they're out of wine. Jesus said, well, what's that to me? And she didn't say anything else according to Scriptures, but she turned to the men and said, whatever he tells you to do. Now that's important right there, guys. Whatever he tells me and you to do, we need to do it, and we will do it if we believe that he is who he says he is. Okay, so he tells, and they had 6 water pots sitting there, and that was about 120 gallons of water with the combined 6. And he tells them, says, fill it full. They fill it full, and he says to them, now draw out and take it to the governor. They drew it out. When the governor tasted this water that Jesus had turned to wine, he said, "Why most people serve the good wine first, but you've kept the good till last." Now let me tell you something. Anything Jesus does is going to be good. But now, who could make 120? I believe it's 126 gallon at these Crott's Hill, or 120 gallon, and who could turn that water to wine instantaneously? You don't know about it, nobody else could do it. But Jesus just spoke it into existence. Now, why did he do it? He did it to show me and you who he was, what he was. So it was one of those infallible proofs. It couldn't be mixed up. So he turned the water to wine, and then notice something else that he did. On one occasion, he fed 5,000 men beside the women and children. It is possibility that he fed 30,000 people there that day, because each man had a wife, each man had some kids. Okay, but now here's the thing I'm going to try to show you, is that this is an unreasonable thing that he did. This is just not reasonable. But anyway, there was a little boy there that had 5 biscuits and 2 fish. And when Jesus told them to feed the multitude, they said, we haven't got enough money to feed this crowd. They could just take a little. And Jesus said, well, what have you got? And one of the disciples said, well, there's a kid down there that's got 5 biscuits and 2 fish, but what's that? Anyway, the kid let Jesus have the 5 biscuits and 2 fish. He fed possibly 30,000 people there that day with 5 biscuits and 2 fish. Now listen to me, kids. Could anybody but Jesus do that? Does that not prove to you infallibly who he is? That's all he did it for, was feed that multitude, so I could be sitting here today talking to you about it. So that's another. Now I know I can't cover them all, because they all weren't written. I wouldn't even if they had, I couldn't cover them all. Now let me show you something else that I think is important. And I think this is the greatest proof of all. You know, he was tried. He was sentenced to death. He was hung on a cross between 2 thieves. So there was 3 men crucified there that day. 3 men shed their blood, but only one rose from the grave. And that was the man that hung on the center cross. That was Jesus. Now, remember what he said while at the end of the cross experience, just before he died. He cried with a loud voice and said, "It is finished." Now, listen, children.